Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Beyond the Case, which is a podcast where global leaders from Harvard Business School's OPM community join in a personal capacity and they share the real decisions, failures, and mental models that go behind building enduring companies. A very special guest today, it's Ludimila Mangili. She was with me in OPM 67 in October of this year. Ludimila, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for the invitation here. I'm really happy to be part of this.
Great. Yeah, glad to have you. Do you want to introduce yourself for the listeners and tell us about what you do?
Um, I was born in a small city in the countryside of Brazil. I grew up surrounded by very strong family values and a deep sense of independence and study law, maybe believing that understanding people and justice would be my path. But yet, in the final year of the college, I came across to something very unexpected. I met the partners of a financial advisory firm specialized in M&A and in the sell side of the transaction. This ain't really a new word to me. One of business, strategy, and negotiation. Although I had no background in finance, something resonate with me. I decided to change my career and move to this. And from the last 22 years of my life, I've been in this field in the financial market here in Brazil, advising families and founders in selling their company or even raising capital. It has been very interesting because it's very dynamic. A lot of very nice stories behind business and entrepreneurs.
And which company are you with today?
It's a company called IGC Partners. We have operations here in Brazil and Latin America and branching in Florida.
So, given your position, from your perspective, what do founders most misunderstand about their negotiating power when they first come to you?
Questions. I think they underestimate the emotional cost of the process. Founders usually prepare carefully from a financial and operational perspective, but very few prepare themselves to the sense of loss that comes with this letting go process when you are selling your company, or even with what is the impact in the culture of the business having a partner, raising capital from a third party. So the company is often connected with their identity and their daily rhythm, their social standing, and things like this. So not being emotional prepared to this process, it's a nightmare. It makes things really difficult. And when this dimension is not known, it shows up in later resistance, second guessing during the negotiation process, or even final requests that sometimes it's not so reasonable to the other side of the table. When they have these emotional clarity on what they are looking for, it's not just about numbers, never, never, never. So when they know it, when we can work on a list, this is easier, simple. Things get more easy to handle, easy to address, and then you can reflect on valuation, price structure, or governance structure, what they are really looking for in this transaction, But they really underestimate the emotional cost of the process. And this is something that I always try to work from the very first beginning when I start discussing a process.
When should founders start preparing for a sale, even if they don't want to sell yet?
That's the perfect time when you don't want to sell, because then you have mental clarity. So thinking about what would be a good exit, and when you don't need cash, so it's a good momentum to think about raising capital because you don't need it. And this is the best BATNA. as we know from our negotiation classes, a BATNA is the best alternative to a non-transaction, let's say, non-agreement, or the plan B, right? Easier. So when you don't need these transactions, even to sell or to raise capital, is your best alternative, And when you don't think about a transaction as something to get rid of a problem or an issue that you have in the company. So this is the best time to think about, because then you can really understand what you were looking for, the price, but the value that it's involved in a transaction. And when I say value, it means the type of partner that you would like to have on your side on the day after of the transaction, the non-compete clause that you think after these, because a transaction is a transition, and most of the founders in the family struggle to think about what is after this transaction. So when you have this clear mindset, that you know that it's a transition and you think about what comes next, is the best thing to go through this process. So when you don't need to sell, it's easier to, organize your thoughts on that, and then you get it done. The execution part would be much easier for these parties if they think about before going to the process, because the process is really emotional. A lot of things comes together with this. And so if you can, again, take perspective and do it when you don't need it, it's another thing.
Beyond just financial preparation, what else goes into being ready for sale of a company?
I think, again, the best company to sell is the one that you can have or held for the rest of your life. Doesn't have revenue concentration in a client or concentration in a supplier, FX exposure, good cash generation, very healthy growth. This is the best company for you to think about in a sale process. This is the best company for you to be the shareholder. And in the decision to sell, it's not because, again, you have a problem, you want to solve something, but because it's a time of the market, it's a good opportunity, or maybe because you as a shareholder want to have a next chapter in your life, and this asset, it's not part of it anymore. So this is what you have to think about technically, when you are selling your company. But again, the emotional part and preparation, it's very, very important. So first you have to separate the shareholder from the equity holder in the personal perspective. Letting go, not having these as your identity, it's very important. Some founders thinking about the company as a son, thinking about as themselves. Having these clear mindset, thinking about the company and as an investment, as an asset. Of course, you have a lot of work on that. A lot of families have business around their history. It's very nice to have this legacy, but when things are all together, it's really hard to take this decision.
What are some of the parameters that you guide founders around when it comes to an offer that they receive for the sale of the business? Is it all about just the sale price, or are there more factors that they consider?
When we think about valuation, there are some metrics that we use to compare assets in the same sector, same kind of companies. We use publicly traded companies, multiples. So we can have other transactions in the same field that we can use. So these really give us a sense of rationale behind a DCF model, right? And the DCF model will depend on the company and the time of investment, future growth, and margin in some aspects of the business. But again, this is a reference, you know. And a transaction, it's not just about price, but it's about value. And as I said, value goes beyond that. It's more related to the terms, who is going to be your partner, what are the future. I face several transactions that my clients were not selling for the best price of the table to the best bidder, but they decided to sell to the second or to the third because the legacy of the family would be in a better hands than to the best offer. So again, it's about really think what you want to get in this process. And most of the times the price is just a small part of it. It's the easiest one to get because it's the first one that you discuss. And negotiations are about just give and take. It's about understanding what both parties are looking for in a transaction and deeply understand. It's about asking questions to understand deeply, not to have a leverage, not to get information, just to have a leverage. This is really to understand and try to create something together. It's about expanding the pie before you split it. So this is a very healthy process, and it comes after a very good relationship. And so most of the times when we go to a negotiation process, or when we go to, this table, we think of these given intake and this back and forth process and hiding your cards. And it's not about that. It's about having a good relationship before trying to understand the interest behind the discussions, trying to create something together. And then every part of the negotiation will have its part, but you create something together.
In terms of the process, if someone's looking to sell a company, what would that look like? How long would it take for your firm to maybe do your diligence on the client to get them ready in terms of a deal room, and then finding a prospect to get acquired or for a partial stake, and then the negotiation? And also, could you talk about some of the clauses that come along with a sale? It's not just about the money, right? There could be maybe a payout structure or some other clauses. Anything you could share which founders should be aware of?
Sure. So the process, I would say that can take on average an year, but it will depends on each country and, the law and the things more related to the jurisdiction that the company is in. And the complexity, of course, if you have several branches abroad and so on. But it's a long process. It's not a simple one because you do have to have time to prepare yourself, and the materials that are gonna be involved in these, information memorandum, and even the target list and discuss. Then you're gonna have a roadshow period, which is around 2 to 3 months. And then after getting the first offers, the non-binding offers, you're gonna move to the due diligence process. And due diligence really depends on the complexity of the company and the legislation behind it. But it usually takes 3 months. And in parallel, you can discuss the final agreement. And this discussion, on average, takes like 2 months or 3 months. It really depends. If it's 100% sale, it will be faster and easier. It is more a partnership or raising capital. You do have to discuss the shareholders agreement terms, and these could be really intense, and it really depends on what kind of agreement and arrangement you have. So this is the time frame. Depends on some industries are regulated, like financial market services. They usually have a central bank approval or even an antitrust authority if comes to consumption and these kind of things. So you may have a period that you have a signing but don't have a closing. So this is really a transition period where you know that you're going to have a transaction, but you were waiting for a third party approval to have this transaction implemented. When you're thinking about a founder or a family behind this decision, you have to manage the company, thinking about these possible transaction, but managing, considering that it could not be implemented. So it's really tough to go through, this process. Of course, I advise some transactions that were much faster than a year, but I also had some transactions that took like 3 years, 2 years. So manage the company while you were in this process, it's really challenging.
And I'm guessing if at the latter stages, if a deal falls through, it really affects the morale of the leadership.
Some aspects that um, are interesting, like investments. Should I keep these in my P&L and budget for the next year or not? Hiring new people, or even changing the level, or should I not? So it's a very unique moment that decisions are not so clear if you should or not do because of this process. And I always say that you should move on, not considering a transaction. But at the end of the day, we know that it's difficult to think like this, because if you are in this process, it's because you want to. So not considering these for the daily management of the company, it's something a little, ambiguity. There's a little ambiguity on this.
Have you ever felt the temptation to join a founder or a leadership team in their mission where you're doing diligence and you go like, hey, I feel so passionately about what you're doing. I wish I was a part of your company.
Yes, sometimes, because we live almost a year together doing this project. Some of the companies are really nice, with very nice management team. The culture of the company is really unique or very well aligned with my values. Sometimes in these 22 years, I was so excited with the client and the shareholders and the business plan that I was willing to stay closer, but never happened. But yes, there are some very nice business around it.
Talk to me about OPM. What made you apply to OPM?
This is a very nice question, because it was a very unique experience, and I would say a lifetime experience. So I majored in law. I didn't have the opportunity to have like a formal education in business. I learned a lot from my clients and their business in their perspective. It was nice, but again, having this structured education, it was really interesting to study things that I've never thought in my life, such as Toyota process, production process. But through these, I had a lot of really nice ideas related to my services provider business. It was really nice also to be part of these international class with very different cultures and experience, globally speaking. I decided, the founder of IGC was part of, I think, OPM 50 something, some years ago, and shared his experience with us. And since that moment, I was really willing to go. I just waited a little bit because my kids at the time were younger, and now they are 11 years old. They're twins. And so I just waited, these moments to be there and part of it, but it was really nice.
Which professor left the biggest impression on you?
I think Das is the one, right? I think he gave us a wake up call when he said about agencies, looking for something that you already know. how to do, and you can replicate in a different segment or model or these kind of things. So I think this was very nice, and resonate a lot with my history, because every single transaction is a different one. But at the end of the day, you can find these and implement this same thing that, happens differently, but it's rhymes, never repeats, but rhyme. This was very nice. I also like a lot and could enjoy the finance classes because having worked a lot with it my whole career in life. Again, when you think about the same thing, but in another instance, going to the academic and coming back to this, it was really interesting and nice. And I really like also the opportunity to have teachers that were not from the business side. We had this teacher that had this army background and talked about leadership. It was very nice to have this mindset.
Um, Talk to me about your morning routine. What are the first 60 or 90 minutes looking like once you wake up?
I'm not the person that wake up very happy. For me, it's really discipline process, but I usually wake up really early, like 10 to 5 or 5 a.m. And I go to the gym or even for running. So while I was in the campus, it was really nice because I wake up like 5 a.m. I run around this very nice river that we had in front of us. It was really nice. And after an hour, when I was coming back, I usually met some people coming in and they were like, "You did it! You make it!" I was like, "Yes, I'm coming back." So it was interesting. And I love to wake up really early and, first thing go and run and, organize my mind. And then, I usually have breakfast with my kids here if I'm in Brazil. And then I start my working day, after these gym or running, making something that I don't like to do that much, but I have to. I feel that I have the energy to get all my to-do list done. But I'm very methodic and very organized. I like to have all my to-do very clear, a clear agenda for the day to get my things done.
If you could talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her?
Be patient, because when I was younger, I was not that patient as I think I am today. But keep being very resilient. My this is all about me. I've been very resilient in all my the challenge that I faced over time, changing careers, changing from a small city to Sao Paulo, which is a huge city, entering the financial market without having this finance background, or even as a woman in this market, because 22 years ago in Brazil, there was no women working in this field. Still today, there are really few. I was the only woman from Brazil in the OPM this year, and so it's quite of a challenge for us to manage the maternity with this career. So, yeah, being resilient, it's something that I would say keep it. It's very important.
Absolutely. My last question for you is there a book that has left an impression on you that you'd like to talk about?
Several, because I love books, but as I would answer something different, not in a personal perspective. People always ask me about negotiation books, and there are several, but I have to say that you have to start with getting to yes. It's a very easy, simple book, very basic, but very important. So getting to yes is the first one. After that, you can read all of them. They always say never split the difference, which is a nice book. But you have to start with this and to learn about these Harvard negotiation skills because it's there.
What were your thoughts on Professor Malhotra's negotiation classes, given that you have a background in negotiation yourself?
Very nice and interesting, and having the exercise were really interesting to see. But I think at the end of the day, the exercise became like a competition. I think the students, including myself, they lost the sight of the exercise of the conversation, listen, trying to build something together to like a competition. But the classes were amazing, and as I said, getting to yes is the basic, the baseline of all of these studies. Including his classes. If you read these, you're gonna understand that his classes and his books it starts from that. So, but it was very interesting to see how the students were managing these tools and to see when you have this kind of exercise and competition, how people get really competitive and lose sight of the objective. And this is the real life. So most of the times in a negotiation process, people get lost in the process. They forget about the price, what they are looking for, what they are really interested. And it happens because they are thinking about what the other side of the table is taking and not what they are gaining. What are their takeouts of the negotiation process. It's very easy to get lost in this. I think I saw this during the classes.
I know I said last question before, but I promise this is my last question.
You're free.
What's one piece of advice you would give founders who are approaching major liquidity event in terms of negotiation?
Again, be aware of the emotional cost. So before you start the process, before you are and sit on this table, write down a list of the things that are really important. And you may have like different tiers. Tier one for me is like price, or is it my non-compete clause, or you can have these. Make it very specific and clear. Don't neglect any aspect. So if a small thing for you is important, write down the list. Like, oh, my office, what I would like to have there, or the brand. Just write and make this very clear for you before you start the process. Don't forget this list and go back and always check it, because again, it's very easy to get lost in the process. A lot of different things will come over all these. And if you have these as a map, or if you have very clear your goals, you will be very objective in your askings, and it's easier, trade what you really want from what it's not so important for you, and maybe there is a value there to the other side of the table.
Ludimila, thank you so much. You've been very, very sincere and transparent about sharing wisdom from your part of the industry. This has helped me a lot personally as a young entrepreneur. I'm sure there's a lot of other listeners who could take so much from this and prepare themselves towards getting a successful business outcome. So we do appreciate your time a lot. Thank you once again.
Thank you. It was really nice to be part of it as the OPM program. Again, thank you for this initiative. I think for me, it's very nice not only to share, but to listen to my colleagues and to learn with them. So thank you for dedicating your time to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
See you.